Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reinventing Mental Health, where we are shifting the paradigm of mental health treatment by looking at functional root causes. So today I have with us Dr. Preston Brooks, and he's a functional medicine doctor and founder of Blair Complex Care. His journey began when his daughter was diagnosed with autism at just 4 years old. Determined to help her, he dove deep into the research, and after seeing her recovery, he went back to school to become a doctor. Today, Preston runs an online practice where he works with families across the country, specializing in autism and chronic illness, helping patients uncover root causes and make real, lasting progress. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Brooks.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about, your daughter's journey at the beginning into receiving that diagnosis.
Yeah. How long do we have, Mary?
We have about 40 minutes.
All right. There's a couple of different versions, so I got to know which version. Yeah, no, absolutely. I was your typical father. I just, have always been open-minded and kind of a critical thinker. Love kind of alternative and natural things. But anyhow, I was your typical dad. I worked for the family business. We had a car dealership back in the day. And, I was a manager at the car dealership, helping my father run the business. And so in the first couple of years of her life, my wife probably knew. I know she knew earlier than I did, probably in the 15 to 18 month range is when she figured it out. Something wasn't right. For me, I kind of leaned on the poor advice of the pediatricians and, the people that mean well that say, oh, Einstein's a late talker and everybody's, different. So, I remain hopeful and refuse to acknowledge the fact that she was becoming autistic or did have the diagnosis of autism. So, fast forward, the family dealership, we put it up for sale. Me and my wife decided to leave town because we knew at the time Blair wasn't going to have access to services where we were. We were in a small town, USA. Basically Thomasville, Alabama, which is 5,000 people, super Walmart, a couple red lights. You can get the picture. So we picked up and went to Auburn, which is where our alma mater was. That's where we both went to school. Both got jobs, and my wife took a job in marketing with but clothes buying. So she would travel to markets, and I would stay with Blair. So no longer running a family business anymore. It really kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because I spent a couple weeks with Blair where it was just me and her. And I realized that she could no longer make eye contact with me. And I wondered, it was kind of it messed with my mind. Trying to not use the wrong language here. It messed with my mind, and I had thoughts like, did she ever look at me? Did she ever have eye contact? How did I not notice this? Until now. But anyhow, I realized the problem, and it was going to be autism, diagnosis or not. So I began researching, and that was 2017. Okay. Without the diagnosis. So, in 18, we received the diagnosis, but at that time I had already began research. Obviously vaccines comes up in the research. And, once again, it was this mind game that was being played. It's like, is it the vaccines? Could it have been the vaccines? And you watch these videos and then you do more research and then, well, no, it couldn't have been. And so there's this loop that you go through, especially in the beginning of the research. And that was pre-COVID when information traveled a little bit more freely than it does now. I feel sorry for parents today that are like us, that try and learn and research, because it's the information is so just tailored and suppressed and modified to the highest bidder.
I've had some interesting experiences with recent searches on things and articles that I could find before I can't locate. And when I ask ChatGPT questions, some of the answers that are coming back, I'm like, no, this is so tailored.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that. That's exactly what I was going to say. You know, we lost entire categories, catalogs, libraries of information, however you want to put it, during COVID, during the first year. And a lot of it was autism centered, interestingly enough. Some of it didn't have anything to do with vaccines. I don't know if you remember Autism One. They were a prominent conference back in the day. Really, really appreciate their work. You know, shout out to the Oranga family for putting that on for so many years. I wanted to just speak at that event one day. That was my goal. But hey, we've got MAPS, so we'll do a MAPS conference. But anyhow, their entire library was wiped. It's gone. And there were so many lectures from all the way back in 2011, 2012, all of James Bradstreet's great work. So much lost, you know, even things from like Patricia Kane's lipid membrane therapy. She never once mentioned a shot, and poof, it's gone. Once again, you know, I try to educate parents, send that information because they like it in a video format, but it's gone. So that to me is the digital equivalent to book burning. I mean, they're just because it's digital doesn't, I mean, it's the equivalent. But anyhow, I rest my case. That's where we are.
Well, so now Zuckerberg is finally coming out and saying, yes, we were told to censor things and we were told to censor people.
Yeah. No, I think the FBI had their own office at all of these platforms, and
absolutely,
you know, they could brush in a memo, so to speak, and change things probably pretty easily. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting. But so, you know, I was doing my research. Vaccines would come up, obviously. I decided, you know, I want to take a step forward to help her. I found out about Dan doctors. But I got a list. This was an interesting thing I've never really gotten an answer to. I found a list of Dan doctors. I called and tried to contact a lot of them on the list and never heard back. A lot of the doctors I couldn't find. And I did, you know, kind of a nationwide search. I thought that was interesting. But then I found out about MAPS. So I found my first MAPS doctor. We began working with her. Prior to that, I started CBD oil to treat the neuroinflammation, got some great results. I like to tell that story because it's a good place to start treating the inflammation. You know, it's not gonna, you know, recover your child, so to speak, but it's a great adjunctive to give quality of life and some potential gains in language and behavior. But we started with CBD oil, Charlotte's Web. I found that classic interview done by Vice. Very, very good video. I don't know if you post things in the link, but we could do that.
Yeah, link.
Absolutely. So it was a little interview done by Vice, probably back in 2016. 2-year-old Latino family in California or Oregon. I can't remember exactly. But they started Charlotte's Web with this 2-year-old. And he had a wonderful response. You know, it went from nonverbal to kind of 3-word phrases and interaction with his peers, and you know, the tantrums and everything had been reduced. Wonderful response in a short period of time. So I was like, you know, what's not to, you know, what's to lose? So ordered some. We started that a month in. We started seeing changes. I want to say it was her birthday. Yeah, it was her birthday because we were singing happy birthday to her. And I was sad as a parent, her being 4, wanting her to know that, you know, it's her birthday, right? You know, oddly enough, she didn't even know her name. So there was no way she was going to know, you know, what a birthday was. But I wanted her to. I wanted to celebrate it for her. I wanted to try and get the point across by singing happy birthday. So me as an autism parent back in the day, I sung happy birthday to her probably a dozen times that day. And the 12th, God, I'm getting emotional telling this story. The 12th time we were putting her to bed, I sang it to her. And she said, "I love you, Dad."
Aww.
And she didn't have any functional language at that point in time. And it's not like it began immediately. That was more of a God moment, kind of
Mhm.
letting me know that I was on the right track and needed to pursue this. So we pursued this. Moving forward, we started working with our first MAPS doctor, Dr. Angela Cronovis in Atlanta. We did our first gut reset. Um, she responded really well. Side note, tidbit for the parents, she responded really well once we added the enzyme in. You have to treat those biofilms to really do the
Oh,
proper
absolutely.
job on a
Yeah.
gut reset. So once we added the enzyme in, the gut reset, so to speak, we had the cold flu-like symptoms, Herxheimer. So, if you want to call it that, lasted for a couple of days, and then she emerged kind of with a layer of the autism onion peeled back. She had more awareness, more language. Once again, it wasn't a cure, but it was a big step in the right direction. She began being regular after that. Stool wasn't perfect, but we were regular, which was
A step.
a huge step when you reference going every 3 to 5 days, right? We were prior to CBD, we were once every 5 days, and something I didn't realize until I started really paying attention as a father. I started CBD, and that brought it down to about 3, every 3 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still a big problem. So this took us to going daily. I was obsessed with detoxification at the time because it's the hot topic, right? Especially when you acknowledge that vaccines potentially played a role. Mercury is the big boogaboo in the closet, and you want to chase that monster, so to speak. And so, I was obsessed with that for a little while. So we did chelation. My MAPS doctor really wasn't into that, so we kind of moved on. I took over the care by myself, and we proceeded to do oral chelation, ACC, otherwise known as Andy Cutler chelation. We did 22 or so rounds. Continued to see great progress. We did see some negatives. Chelation is tough on the body. It's not necessarily something I recommend for every family. There's other ways to detox, side note. But, she did go through adrenal fatigue a couple times, which was a tough process. But she, like I said, she proceeded to get better. We took some hair samples, measured the mercury coming out. She had a 600% increase in mercury post detoxification while she's getting better. So this didn't acknowledge what was in her per se, but what was coming out. So, I do think heavy metals play a part to an extent, but people can spend a lot of time and focus on heavy metals. And I think it should be a part. The question is when, what phase of recovery, when do you do it? Do you do it immediately after you treat the gut? I don't know. It just depends on the child. So,
And there's
anyways, back to her story. Go ahead.
There's gentle detoxes too. Like we actually do crystalline zeolite through Revelation Health, and I love that one just because it is so gentle. You can drink a whole bottle of that particular zeolite and it's not going to hurt you like some other zeolites can. But whenever I'm doing a detox with someone, I'm making sure we're using binders because we need to pull all that stuff out. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I feel like you read my mind. You're touching on all the good points. That Andy Cutler didn't realize, hey, shout out to Andy, rest in peace. Great work. I mean, what a story to cure yourself of mercury toxicity and to use research to do it. I think he pointed out a great thing, which is that ALA has the potential to be a gentle chelator. It also is an antioxidant, similar to glutathione. But he binders was not a part of that protocol. So anybody out there who wants to detox, yes, it doesn't matter if it's chelation, doesn't matter if it's a more gentle way just to boost, NRF2 through genetic pathways, still use a binder. Because if you are detoxing and you're moving stuff around, you want to trap it when it gets to the GI. Side note, again, Pectisol is one of my favorite binders because you can actually take it alongside other supplements and it not necessarily like a charcoal per se bind to everything. And it's also, the Pectisol I've found is good to mix other supplements with for kiddos that, things are tough to get into them orally. And then the claim with, I've researched Pectisol, the claim also when the conversation comes to binders is that most binders stay in the GI system. The claim with Pectisol is that it gets into the blood and binds in the blood, which I find interesting. That may be what the citrus fruits have to give to us, with the modified citrus pectin. Very interesting product. I love that. Anyhow, I don't even remember where I was in the journey.
We were talking about her detoxifying, and then you're starting to see progress.
Yes. So we did ACC. I then learned of Dr. Buttar, Rashid Buttar, another shout out, rest in peace. So I actually got a local family physician in that small town I was from to write a DMPS prescription, matching Buttar's formula. And it came from a compounding pharmacy that was familiar with it. So we transitioned from ACC to TD DMPS. Once again, I don't necessarily recommend this process. It's hard to get, but it's another gemstone in the autism history book. It's a very strong chelator. It's stronger than ACC. Funny story, I began applying it barehanded with my daughter. And on day 2, I started having migraines. Needless to say, I was probably moving around mercury. I now know I have APOE4. So I'm at E4. So this boy right here is not moving mercury out of his system. So I've stopped eating sushi. Right? Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's another interesting thing. The APOE SNP, the E4 variation apparently is what everyone used to be. And they call it like the old world version. And I think I think the reason is because inflammation served a purpose when you were like a hunter-gatherer, or you were exposed to more things. And so, if you ate the wrong thing, you would know pretty quickly. You'd be like, you'd tell the tribe or you tell the community or the village, like, hey,
don't eat that.
Oysters. yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's interesting, but that's what I come up with because I had a doctor, another MAPS doctor I worked with point that out, and I researched it because he praised it. He thought it was a great thing, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but he framed it as old gene and I'm thinking, well, doesn't it make me prone to things? But so there is a certain aspect to that I think is interesting. But yeah, so we did.
That's why we're more prone to things because we have so many more toxins in our world than our ancestors did.
You keep hitting on the stuff. So this house we were in, where I'm doing all of this, all these treatments and interventions, guess what was in it? I'll give you one guess. Ding,
Mold.
ding, ding.
Yeah.
So, 2019, we started having strep infections. I haven't told the story. I need to tell the story. 2019, we started having strep infections. My wife and my little girl, they co-sleep. So they started getting strep. And of course, we would treat it with antibiotic. Still ignorant at the time, but it was mostly because my wife made me and forced the issue. So we did antibiotics, and then eventually, it'd come back faster. So by the end of the year, we were at 6 or 7 for the year, and it would come back faster every time. So I started off. First of all, let me give a shout out to all the warrior moms like yourself out there. I reached out into the Facebook ethers and autism groups, back in 2019, because I was at a wit's end. I didn't know how to stop this strap. And I had a few moms amongst all these comments, say, check for mold. So I bought that little petri dish from Lowe's and set a couple around the house. And sure enough, those things started growing mold in no time. I then hired a home inspector to come in, do an air quality test, came back positive, aspergillus, all the good stuff. Then I called the landlord because it was a rental home. Sent him that and said, hey, man, my family's getting sick. I need you to do something about this. So without another conversation for me, he hired a roofing company. Roof got replaced. I watched that process take place and basically found, black spots on the decking where it should be, the color of wood. One of them was right over Blair's bedroom. So there's that. The AC then gets replaced. And I'm like, well, the AC's running fine. There's nothing wrong with the AC unit. So the HVAC company's in there replacing the AC unit. And they pull it out, throw it in the backyard, and I'm asking them, like, why are you guys replacing this? They're like, well, we just got an order put in. And so I said, can you, we're having a mold issue here. Like, can you open this up? And so when it was in the backyard, the guy, because they were just going to throw it away, the guy broke it down, opened it up, and there was black mold all in the inside of the unit on the metal. So it was growing.
And people don't realize that mold can get into your air conditioning system, and then it's blowing through the entire house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So once the roof got replaced and the AC got replaced, and we did some homeopathy, which I think definitely helped, it stopped. The strep stopped. We were fixing to get her tonsils removed, which for pandas patients, pandas is something that's considered normal. The argument's out if you have to or not. But we went to the ENT. I'll never forget. And if we run out of time, I guess if I need to speed things up, let me know. But I think these little side stories.
Always do another conversation too. We can break it up and do multiple streams. That's fine. Cool.
So we go to the ENT to get the tonsils looked at. He looks at them. He says they're fine. I'm kind of turned off by this guy because he treats my daughter like she's a wild animal, kind of, right? So there's that. Even though he's not necessarily, he doesn't say anything. He's a nice old man, but he I get this impression of like, put this thing on a leash, and she just, who can blame her? She doesn't like a white coat. You'll never find me in one. I'll wear scrubs. If you see me in anything healthcare related, it'll be scrubs. But I don't blame her for not liking doctor offices. So we're there. Tonsils look great, compared to the tonsils that he would normally remove. He doesn't think we need to remove them, but it says that it might help, so let's do it. He wouldn't test it for mold allergies because I was told that was the reason I was there. Actually, I was there for mold allergies. I want to know if there was a mold allergy. He wouldn't test her for mold allergies unless she was put to sleep.
Why?
So I had to go. I had to subdue her to. I didn't. Right, but through his eyes, I needed to subdue her to anesthesia in order to mold test her. I imagine that old school cat was probably going to do a scratch test. Side note, do the HDLR, genetic test, life extension. You can get those from Life Extension for a couple $100. That's the genetic susceptibility to mold. But so yeah, he wanted to put her to sleep, take her tonsils. He was like, "We'll take her tonsils out while we're at it." And I'm like, my God, thank you for nothing. See you later, sir. So got rid of the mold. And I told that story because partly I wanted to share this. We treated it with amoxicillin, the strep. Amoxicillin is a synthetic derivative of penicillin. Penicillin is
It's
a
mold.
derivative of penicillium. Penicillium is a mold.
Yep.
So if you have mold exposure and your immune system just decides to manifest it, as strep, because strep's there, it lives in your colon naturally. It's there. And you have a young kid in school, it's there. So you shut down the immune system, you suppress the immune system with mold, and then you treat the manifestation of that problem, which is strep in our case, with a mold toxin. And I really think that relationship right there, that's, we're talking about funguses here,
Right.
but that's true, like antibacterial resistance, like, because you're using the thing that's causing like it, you know what I mean? That's the reason the strep comes back that much quicker.
Yeah.
But that, and when I said that to the ENT, he just kind of glassed over. I was like, yeah, I don't know. Kind of like he didn't see how there would be a relationship there. But of course, you can't blame him. He's in his own narrow space. But anyways, moving forward, we did the TD DMPS for a short period of time. There was a nationwide shortage at that moment for some reason, so I could no longer get the prescription filled. So then we moved to TD DMSA, which backfired, which is why DMSA has that effect of lowering neutrophil count, which can also suppress immunity. So living in mold. And trying to chelate, move heavy metals while lowering neutrophils. I really think for her that was probably the beginning of like a PANS PANDA phenomenon.
Yep.
Even though we had the strep, I don't think it was like a true immune system problem. I think our immune system was just being suppressed. But when we did the TD DMSA, and not to knock, because I know it's helped a lot of families, but when we did that, I think that mixed with the mold, she had a flare, and the flare was a scarlet fever type reaction. And I've seen this before. It was a scarlet fever type rash and reaction, which is strep. And it covered her entire body, and she was so irritated and so inflamed. Anyways, so that was during that period of time. We stopped chelating. We moved to different things like colostrums, camel's milk, Patricia Kane protocol, which is the phosphatidylcholine sodium butyrate lipid membrane therapy, so to speak, which is another gentle detox. Phosphatidylcholine will clean the cell pretty well. It's components. It's the main components of the cell and the organelles of the mitochondria, all the above. So, her theory,
MaxGen in their works panel has started including that genetic SNP and whether or not you are already not getting enough of that particular enzyme.
Dude, here you go again. It has
started, Well,
no, keep going. I've got a lot to say about that.
A year ago, it didn't used to show up in the panels. So our practice, we do the genetic SNPs. We are looking specifically at MTHFR, COMT, APOE, ACE. Like I'm looking for all of those things, and that one has started showing up.
And when it wasn't always on there.
No, it wasn't. And so I have started just like really starting to educate myself on that.
Absolutely.
And its importance.
Absolutely.
And we're now adding that supplement on for a lot of families.
Yeah, no, you should make that.
Back, they don't have it.
Look, there's during Blair's recovery process, obviously I'm going to remember the best things. Like phosphatidylcholine was one of the best things. And Patricia Kane's work, she wasn't a doctor, but she was a PhD. Her work was wonderful, and it's continued to this day. I can't remember the doctor's name. He's a MAPS doctor as well. But anyhow, so it's still continued to this day, and it's being brought into the Alzheimer's space. I think it's another piece to the puzzle, especially with the cholesterols and things being deprived from them via statins. But no, thank you for. You just keep bringing up the greatest stuff. So the PEMT gene, SNP, homozygous. I absolutely think that's the reason that the Patricia Cain's protocol is so effective. And I think that's why it helps our kids. And absolutely. Throw that in at some point in part of almost everybody's protocol. If you see the PMT, then obviously. But no, hey, shout out to MaxGen for putting that in there. I didn't realize it wasn't always in there. But I've actually taken note of that and thought to myself, well, now we have an explanation for the PK protocol. But I don't know if you're familiar with her work because it got deleted off the internet. But
no, I've had a hard time finding information on, why did this suddenly just start popping up on the reports? It wasn't there before. So I'm digging right now for research on this particular gene.
Okay. So, I don't know that she ever mentioned the gene, but she had a couple different lectures at Autism One. And she had several different case studies that she would go over. One was a preemie baby, another was a dog, a lot of autism cases. But she would do this test from Europe, and it would zoom into the nucleus of the cell and tell you what toxin was sitting over the top of the nucleus.
Interesting.
Okay. So they could tell you, like, if it was antibiotic, or if it was mercury, if it was, whatever the toxin was, they could tell you. And so then they would perform the PK protocol, right? This is PEMT excluded. Then they would perform the phosphatidylcholine and the whole nine. And they would retest with that test from Europe. And the toxin would no longer be on the nucleus. Would be gone.
Ooh, interesting.
So that's like an epigenetic, thing. I like to be able to measure that, right? And I wonder, if that's how homeopathy would work too, kind of bumping that toxin off of the nucleus. But and also in anesthesia, I know it's been used before to clear anesthesia in the case of anesthesia poisoning or overdose. In addition to that, another sad story. I don't like to go into the doctor, and I even though I'm a doctor, I don't like going to the doctor. And I don't take my dogs to the vets either. Even though I love vets, I think vets are great physicians because they're the pharmacy and the doctor, so that's a lot to take on. But I don't use vets. So I had dogs get sick, and one of them was a German Shepherd, one was a Bulldog, and so I went to Tractor Supply, and this was me and my dumb ignorant self. I got a doxycycline, I believe is what it was called. The antibiotic that doesn't have to be refrigerated. It had like a picture of a goat on the front of it or something. So I was like, this will be fine for the dogs. I gave this to them. Gave them one injection, and then like the next day they got worse. And with a dog, you're supposed to give an injection like kind of to the right of the glute and in the back of the leg, straight in there. And then, I against my intuition, I gave another one of these antibiotic injections. The next day they were even worse. So then you would think, like, Preston, research, come on, you're healing your daughter from autism. Take care of your dogs, bro. I then began to research and found a paper where they gave that same exact antibiotic to beagle puppies. The beagle's puppies' liver liver or kidneys, one of the two, began to shut down.
Oh no.
And you know what they gave those puppies? Phosphatidylcholine infusions.
Okay.
So obviously when that happened to my dogs, I started pumping Body Bio PC down their throats because I had some in the cabinet, and they recovered. They did. They recovered. But yeah. Side note: it's just those are little tidbits that I kind of have, parallels from different, places and specialties. But yeah, no, I'm a big proponent of that. Yeah, and I also like Ion Biome. I think Ion Biome, Dr. Zach Bush, that's great work. When we started that initially in my daughter's recovery, we saw gains, social gains. And then, it obviously works through sealing that membrane, the blood-brain barrier, and the leaky gut. Because if you have a leaky membrane in the gut, it's probably leaky up here as well, right? That's where some of that autoimmunity, I think, comes in. But with Blair's story, I decided to go to school, obviously, during COVID. I made the video. I don't know. Yeah, I think you've probably seen the video. We can post that in the comments too. I made that video a little over 2 years after starting. She was doing really, really well. Not fully conversational, but on the way. Went back to school, moved to Georgia, chose chiropractic as the profession because I didn't want to be a nurse, didn't want to be an NP, a PA, didn't want to have to dance with the devil, so to speak, and get a flu shot or something just to help other people. So I chose chiropractic. But anyhow, we've continued to help her, and I've continued to run labs even while I was in school. Shout out to Taka. I know a lot of people feel differently about that organization, but I was awarded a scholarship while I was in school for my daughter and we utilized it for testing. So I ran a tick-borne 2.0 from Vibrant Labs and a neural zoomer over about a 2-year period of time. And we were already at like an ATEC of 4, so we were on, recovery's doorstep, so to speak, but I still didn't feel like I had all the answers, We can talk about immunizations and we can talk about root causes, but there are still things, driving that condition, this very day. So that's when I kind of learned about PANS and PANDAS, and that it was another big piece and aspect to autism, if not a medical model for autism. And that's kind of what I've come to learn. There are kids that are detoxification kiddos that you can get things out of them and they get better. There's a lot of kids that don't. A lot of kids that flare and have this kind of roller coaster up and down. And so I'm of the opinion that PANS and PANDAS is the medical model that we should lean on as physicians. Not only that, we should push, the healthcare system, NIH, National Institutes of Mental Health, otherwise known as NIM, Secrets of NIM. Weird. Yeah, weird, right? Remember that rap movie? So it was actually NIM that discovered, not the movie now, but it was actually NIM that discovered PANDAS. It was the only pediatrician, only medical doctor, not only pediatrician, but the only medical doctor staffed on NIM is the one that found the correlation between strep and this condition known as PANDAS. That to me was very interesting in and of itself. And when you really dive into her research, Dr. Susan Sweeto, there we go. And then the other prominent researcher is Dr. Madeline Cunningham from Arkansas or Oklahoma. I can't remember what university she's at. She's more of a strep expert, but now she's become kind of a PANDAS expert. that being said, I've studied all their work, watched all their lectures. They've said in so many words that they had to limit the diagnostic criteria to basically get this taken seriously by the medical institution,
Yep.
medical establishment.
Yep.
So when you look at the diagnostic criteria and you take that into account, and you see that one of the criteria, one of the boxes that has to be checked is regression post age of 3. That's when you realize, okay, well, how many kids now, if you move that, if you take that out, how many kids now fall into this bracket? So I've done my own case studies in my own practice, because I've got to follow my heart and what I saw to be true with my daughter. So 9 out of 10 kids I test for autoimmunity, cross reactions with autoneuronal antibodies in the brain, autoimmune encephalitis driven by strep or some other infection. I see it 9 out of 10 kids.
We're seeing a lot of strep in kids too. Like when we do our functional testing, one of our functional tests is the GI map. And I am getting strep at astronomical levels in these kids that have an ASD diagnosis.
And we also have to take environment into account. Mold could be a driver, it could not be. But I also have seen in my patients as well, just like my own life, it can definitely manifest as strep reactions, at least in the history. And it's something to look at. It's almost, unfortunately, it takes going through it to appreciate how impactful mold can be. Because typically people just think of like an old leak somewhere. And if they don't know of that, if they don't see that, they just don't think it's a problem. How much time do we have? Here?
We got to wrap here in the next few minutes because my next session starts pretty soon.
So like 5 or 2?
2.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll save the other mold story because we're
going to schedule another one because it sounds like we could talk for days.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, Mary, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so much for coming on today. For all of our viewers, we are so glad that we brought Dr. Brooks on today. We're going to bring him back because it does sound like we could talk and talk and talk. So please make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you can get the next video.